I've been driving 18-wheelers for over 20 years. Seen wrecks, storms, and men lose their minds somewhere between midnight and the next mile marker. But that night on Harlow Ridge, I saw something that shouldn't exist. A woman standing in the snow, pale as the headlights, calling my name, though we'd never met. And when I found her car the next morning, half buried under the drift, her body was still inside. So tell me, how does a dead woman whisper to a living man? Buckle up, driver. The engine's warm, the coffee's black, and this story doesn't slow down once it starts. Hit that follow, drop a like, and stay till the end. Because what happened on that mountain will make you question every lonely mile you've ever driven. Evan Cole woke before the alarm, as if someone had leaned in the dark and whispered right against his ear. It's time. The kitchen was a square of quiet in their small rental on the edge of Billings, Montana. The coffee maker breathed steam and old metal. The winter before dawn was an iron blue hush, and when he pulled the curtain back a thumb's width, frost veined the glass like tiny maps. He moved through the room in layers he could put on in his sleep. Thermal long johns, flannel, hoodie, canvas jacket lined with wool. His hands were the kind that knew wrenches by weight, steering wheels by the chatter of the column, and storms by the feel in the shoulder. Evan was in his middle 40s with that steady calm some men wear after long years of keeping their word. 2 long-haul decades under his belt and counting. Plenty of time to learn that a highway is not just a strip of asphalt. It can be a country with moods. It can like you or not. Naomi came in, tying her hair into a knot she'd undo as soon as he left. She had learned her way around goodbyes. Make his sandwich the night before, slide notes into the glove box, keep the light tone as if this were just a quick errand to the store. She pressed a lidded mug into his hand. "Take the pie last," she said, mouth quirking, "or you'll be on a sugar rise past Bozeman, and I'll have to hear about it on the phone." Evan smiled in that quiet way of his, warmth seeping through the worn lines around his eyes. "I'll pace myself." On the table lay the route scribbled on paper, though the phone app could have done it all. He trusted paper when the temperature fell and batteries lied. Billings to Bozeman, to Butte, to Missoula along Interstate 90, then push over Lookout Pass toward Idaho, and north into the hills on a county road most maps forgot until spring. The trailer held pallets of groceries and construction goods. Flour, canned peaches, sacks of dog food, boxes of nails, rolled roof felt. The kind of winter cargo that reminds a man he's not just moving boxes, he's hauling somebody's week. Mason shuffled in, all teenage height and the sleepy bravado, feet bare on cold tile. "You still coming to my game Sunday?" Mason asked, hoisting his backpack with a grunt meant to sound casual. "If I'm back," Evan said, "I'll be wherever you are, kid. Corner bleachers yelling too loud." "Promise?" Mason asked, not looking up, because the question was a little too big for eye contact. "I don't make that word cheap," Evan said, "but I want it." They talked in the shorthand built by years of his comings and goings. Their house carried those silences well. The clock ticked. The warmth from the baseboard heaters kept the kitchen a little too hot and the hallway a touch too cold. Outside, the world creaked like an old ship frozen in place. Evan pulled on his cap, kissed Naomi's forehead, pulled Mason into a one-armed hug that lasted a heartbeat longer than usual, and headed into the winter. The Peterbilt sat where it always sat, in the lot behind the duplex, paint the color of late pumpkins and chrome dulled by salt. He laid a palm on the fender as if greeting a good horse. The truck answered with the faint settling sounds of metal returning last night's heat. "All right, old girl," he said. Let's be good to each other. A routine can save a life. He made the walk, touching and looking. Oil level, tire walls, lug nuts, fifth wheel lock, airlines, glad hands, kingpin, lights. Chains coated in road grime rode the rack like reminder and threat. The toolbox held its faithful mess. Anti-gel bottles clinked as he moved them forward. Spare socks, a coil of rope, a wool blanket rolled tight, his battered thermos. A dog-eared paperback he had been reading for months in inch-long bites. Inside the cab, he thumbed on the radio. A local weather voice warned of a possible whiteout near Homestake Pass, with gusts up to the kind that blow your thoughts sideways. He grinned despite himself. Montana humor is the dry kind. The engine rolled over with a cough that became a rumble you feel in the ribs. He let her idle long enough to melt the thin skin of frost gathering inside the windshield. He checked mirrors because a habit was law, lifted 2 fingers off the wheel toward the neighbor who sometimes waved, and pulled into the quiet street. The city yawned awake. On the bridge over the Yellowstone River, he felt the wind reach up from the water. He watched Naomi's message pop up on the phone cradle, drive steady, and sent back a voice note. I will. He took the on-ramp to Interstate 90 and the world widened. The sky over the prairie was pale pewter and the last stars were stubborn. Evan found the gear that matched his mood and let the truck settle into its own kind of stride. He liked this part, the long, low murmur of miles beginning. He sipped coffee, swallowed the heat, and let it spread. He stopped near Livingston to check tension straps and to share half a breakfast burrito with a rangy cattle dog that materialized from nowhere, patient and polite. The wind coming down from the Absarokas had teeth. He added a little more anti-gel to the tanks, patted the side of the trailer, and climbed back up. By the time the mountains shouldered closer west of Bozeman, snow started, the kind that seems decorative at first, a handful of feathers that fools you into relaxation. Trucks bunched a little, then stretched out again. He kept room in front of him you could measure in full breaths. The radio fell in and out. Someone somewhere cussed softly about a jackknifed rig westbound the week before. Stories on the road traveled like birds, changing in midair. Outside Butte, the wind sharpened and leaned out of the canyons with intent. Evan dropped a gear before the pass, kept his hands light and his eyes kind. On a pull-out near the top he paused, hood up, listening to the note of the motor. That familiar honesty in the tone, like a friend telling you how it really is. He phoned Naomi while he still had bars. Signal's patchy, he said. If I go dark after Missoula, it's just the mountains. Just the mountains, she repeated, laying equal weight on both words. Text me when you can. Before sundown if I have a sky. They did not waste goodbye words. They never had. He stowed the phone and put the hammer down. The descent was clean, if slow. In the mirror, the trailer's white flank was a small winter hill obediently following him. Missoula gave him diesel and coffee that tasted like the idea of coffee, and a clerk with purple hair who asked, "You headed up or down?" "Up and over," he said. "Road's cranky," she said, glancing past him at the rolling line of trucks in the forecourt. "Be nice to her." The clerk's choice of pronoun felt correct. Evan tucked it away like superstition. From St. Regis to Lookout Pass, the lanes narrowed under drift and the sky dropped lower. Daylight had turned lightless. He slowed to a pace that matched his pupils. Sometimes safety is a matter of acknowledging the truth of what you can't see. By the Idaho line, the snow quit being a flutter and became purpose. Visibility fell to a handful of truck lengths. Evan found himself talking to the Peterbilt the way he did when the world got small. Easy now, he said. We'll outweight her. We always do. A shimmer in the periphery looked like a person trudging the median in a parka too thin for sense. He blinked. No one there. Just the spin and glitter of flakes at the edge of the beam. He told himself what he tells himself every winter: stormlight plays tricks, and draped his mind in patience. Past Wallace, he took a big gravel lot where trucks collected like cattle in a lee, rigs nosed toward the wind, drivers preserving their heat. He positioned so the gale slapped steel rather than found its way up under the hood. He set the brakes, killed the high beams, and sat in that soft, sudden darkness a cab carries like a blanket. Dinner was leftover meatloaf from Naomi, a slice of cheddar, 2 pickles. The taste of home cut into squares by a pocket knife that had opened 100 such meals. He left the engine running at a low purr to keep the fuel from thinking it was a candle. On the shelf above the passenger seat, a Polaroid in a magnet frame showed Naomi squinting at summer river glare, and Mason flinging a rock into that late July Yellowstone shimmer. Evan looked at it the way he always did, as if there were instructions written there. When he finally stretched out in the sleeper, he left the curtain partway open so he could keep an eye on the world. Snow brushed the windshield in steady, angled threads, 1,000 soft fingers trying the glass. More trucks slid in, one after another, a small fleet surrendering the night. Somewhere, someone laughed through a cell phone at a story from far away. Someone's radio played a country song about highways and someone waiting in a porch light. Evan set his alarm for a few hours later. Check fluids, walk the rig, make sure the wind hadn't piled adrift against the exhaust. He has known men who slept through the night in cold like this and woke up slower than a person should. The dream came because winter always brings one when a man finally lets go. It was not dramatic. He was on Interstate 90 under a broad summer sky, and the yellow line unspooled so friendly he felt a grin he hadn't felt in years. Naomi's laughter rode shotgun. Mason whistled off key from the sleeper. The truck sang that contented note like a cat on a heater. Then, in the dream, Evan realized his hands weren't on the wheel. The wheel turned anyway. The engine held steady without him. He reached, and the wheel slid just out of reach, as if to say, not yet. He woke with his fingers flexed toward nothing. He listened. Storm, engine, his own breath. He forced a chuckle at himself. He pulled a wool cap over his ears and closed his eyes again, but lighter this time, the way a soldier dozes, ready to stand when the world says so. Dawn never really happened. The darkness simply went thin. The lot had changed shape under the night's hand. Snow had written new lines. Evan stepped out, face stung clean by a slap of cold so honest he could have thanked it. He walked the perimeter of the Peterbilt, beat the ice off a mud flap, knocked frost from lines, cleared the intake, listened for any lie the motor might try. Everything answered true. Back in the cab, he wrapped both hands around his mug, breathing steam. The radio hissed and cracked, and then caught a forecast spoken by a man who sounded too cheerful for the facts. Whiteout bands moving like slow waves along the state line. Gusts stronger toward the north, drifting like dunes. If you don't have to travel, the man said, don't. The advice was good and meaningless for a person who carried other people's week in his trailer. Evan weighed the miles to go. If he pushed now, he could be past the worst before noon. If he held here, he'd get the afternoon window and a cleaner shot with more daylight. He felt for the road like a farmer feels for sky, a hunch built on years. He clicked the radio off and listened without electronics. The wind had dropped from a roar to a sustained breath. The snow angle had softened. He could feel the road saying, choose, and choose honest. Okay, he said aloud to the cab. To the line, to himself. We'll move. Gently. He eased the truck back onto the interstate, each motion measured, as if he were walking past someone sleeping. The convoy strung toward the west like a quiet thought. An hour passed in a patient crawl, and then two. And then the world did one of those winter shifts that feel like a switch thrown behind a locked door. The light went odd, a color you cannot name, and the flakes thickened as if the sky had learned a new trick. Wind returned as if it had forgotten something and come back for it. Evan felt the small hairs along his neck say, "Hey." He downshifted, pocketed speed, and let the truck sit deeper on its haunches. The air inside the cab tasted like metal and coffee. Outside, the horizon narrowed to the length of a football field, then half that. A sign for chains flashed past on the right, like a warning you read in a dream and promised to remember. The thought came uninvited the way some thoughts do when the world tightens. Sometimes a road takes instead of gives. He shook it once like a dog shakes water and set his jaw. "Hold with me," he told the truck. "We'll talk our way right through her." And because he was not a man to say everything at once, and because the road has its own manners, and because somewhere back in Billings a porch light would click on. When twilight came, whether he was there to see it or not, he did the simplest brave thing. He kept both hands loose and true, and drove on into the kind of snow that makes a man wonder if the white wants his name. By late morning, the storm had stopped pretending to be polite. Snow came down hard enough to blur the world into a moving wall of white. The road was no longer a road, it was a suggestion, a gray ribbon buried under shifting powder. Evan drove with his eyes narrowed, reading the faint depressions left by the truck ahead as though they were the last handwriting of a vanishing traveler. His CB crackled alive. "Westbound, Pete, you got eyes up near Cataldo?" a voice asked, rough and tired. Evan pressed the button. "Copy that. I'm east of Wallace. Visibility's about 30 yards, give or take a miracle." 10-4, came the reply. "They're talking closures at the pass if this keeps up. Some four-wheeler spun out near exit 1. Watch your right lane." He thanked the voice and let the channel fade. Snowstorms create brief friendships, men talking into static, strangers who sound closer than family. For the next few miles, it was him, the hum of diesel, and the heartbeat rhythm of the wipers trying to hold back the chaos. The heater coughed out dry warmth. His thermos rolled slightly on the dash with every curve. Naomi's note, "For luck, for love," was tucked under the CB mic, where he could glance at it when the dark tried to crawl in. He passed a small rest area, half buried. A sedan was parked crooked, lights off, door open. He slowed. Maybe someone needed help. Or maybe the snow had already taken them. He pulled to the shoulder, put the hazards on, and stepped down into a wind that slapped him full in the chest. The car was empty. Driver's door wide, like someone had stepped out mid-sentence. Inside, the keys were in the ignition, engine dead, phone on the seat, still glowing faintly. The last text on the screen read, "I see lights ahead. I think it's nothing else." Evan stood a long moment, trying to understand the silence. The only sound was wind moving snow across metal. He reached into the glove compartment, found the registration. A local Idaho address, name, Abigail Monroe. He stepped back, scanned the white, no footprints leading away, no trail at all. Just smooth, unbroken snow. Something in him wanted to call it in right then. But another part, the part that had lived too many winters alone, said, "The mountain will take care of its own stories." Still, he couldn't just leave it. He called the state patrol, gave the location, the name, the plate, his own ID. The dispatcher said, "We'll send a cruiser when the road clears, driver. Probably walk to the service stop." But Evan knew what footprints looked like. There were none. He climbed back into his truck, wet snow melting down his collar. The heater groaned back to life. He looked once more into the mirror, the car vanishing under snow as if swallowed by time. For the next half hour, he couldn't shake the feeling that the world had gone slightly off tune. The snow had its own rhythm, yes, but beneath it was something else, a low hum in the air, like electricity searching for ground. He thought of Abigail Monroe, whoever she was, and of Naomi waiting in their small kitchen where the air smelled like coffee and cinnamon. By the time he reached Kellogg, the wind calmed. The storm broke open to a strange silence, almost like sound had been switched off. The sky was colorless, neither gray nor blue, just blank. The road stretched empty in both directions. He passed a motel called the Copper Lantern, half hidden behind snowbanks. The vacancy sign flickered weakly, one side buried in drift. He considered stopping for rest, but knew if he did, he might not start again until morning. He kept rolling. At the next mile marker, a shape loomed in the middle of the highway, small, dark, unmoving. He slowed, leaned forward. A dog, thin, shivering, coated in snow. He braked, careful not to slide, and eased onto the shoulder. The dog didn't move. When he stepped out, the animal turned its head, eyes bright amber, watching him like it had been waiting. "Hey there, buddy," Evan said, voice soft. "You lost?" The dog limped toward him, tail low. It was wearing a torn red collar, no tag. He crouched, let it sniff his glove. The dog pressed its head against his leg once, just once, then stepped past him and jumped onto the step of the cab like it knew where it belonged. Evan stared. "Guess you made up your mind," he murmured. Inside, the dog curled up on the passenger seat and closed its eyes. He rubbed a towel through its fur, then poured a little water into his empty coffee lid. The animal drank quietly, like someone finishing a long story. When he pulled back onto the road, something about the hum of the engine felt steadier. He didn't name the dog yet. You don't name things that might disappear. For hours, the storm trailed behind them like a tired ghost. They crossed into the narrow Idaho panhandle, mountains rising on both sides like gray shoulders. The radio picked up a local station, soft static, and then a woman's voice reading the weather. "Cold front moving east. Expect clearing skies by early evening. Drive safe out there, folks." Her tone was warm, human, something you could hold on to. Evan felt a weight ease in his chest. He looked at the dog, now watching the windshield with quiet alertness. "Looks like we made it through the worst," he said. The dog blinked, as if it understood. But somewhere in the back of his mind, the silence of that abandoned car still whispered. A name kept circling: Abigail Monroe. And though he didn't know it yet, that name would be waiting for him again, far down the road, in a place where snow remembers what it covers. The highway shouldered them north, the mountains pulling closer like patient animals. The dog slept and woke in little bursts, ears flicking when snow slid off the roof in a soft avalanche. Evan drove the way he walked through a quiet house at night, careful not to bump into the dark. Near the town of Wallace, the clouds cracked and let through a light so thin it felt like it might break if you breathed too hard. The interstate bent with the river, then unwound toward the Panhandle Flats. Signs for trout guides and antique shops shouldered up against warnings about avalanche zones and rockfall, Old America and older stone negotiating the same slope. By the time the road widened into valley, the sky had gone a brass color, the sun a pale coin behind gauze. The dog sat up when Evan's blinker clicked for an exit. A hand-painted board promised coffee, fuel, and hot pie at a place called the Silver Crown Diner, a low building with a steep metal roof that knew snow was a fact, not an opinion. He pulled the Peterbilt along the far edge of the lot, where big rigs lined up like patient cattle, exhaust plumes drifting and vanishing. Inside, the diner air wore bacon and fryer oil and the sweeter ghost of cinnamon. Faces turned and then turned back, the way small town faces do, measuring you without making you feel weighed. A bell above the door marked his entry with a soft ding. The dog followed at his heel as naturally as a shadow. A woman about Evan's age ran the counter with a speed that suggested no one had ever outweighted her. She had the kind of eyes that could pick a lie out of a pile of laundry. Her name tag read June in letters rubbed pale by too many wash cycles. "You bring your own inspector," she said, nodding at the dog. "He brought himself," Evan said. "Found him on the highway." "Then I owe you coffee, and he gets a slice of ham if he asks politely." June poured the coffee before he could answer. "You look like you could sit a while." Evan took the end stool where he could keep an eye on the window, the truck, the sky. Habit has a seat in a man long before he notices. The dog settled under the counter as if he had been coached. "What do you call him?" June asked, setting down a plate with eggs and toast that smelled like the dictionary definition of good. "Haven't yet," Evan said. "Feels like a promise." "Careful with promises," June said mildly. "They like to outlive you." He cut into the eggs, felt warmth spread into the cold seams of his morning. He told June about the car at the rest area, the open door, the name on the registration, the call to the patrol. He did not say, because he did not quite know how to say it, that the snow had been smooth as a white table. No footprints leading away. June listened the way some people listen in church. Over by the jukebox, a rancher laughed too loud at something only drink could make funny, and a pair of road workers in reflective jackets turned the pages of a tabloid as if they were reading a map to the past. "Abigail Monroe," June repeated, testing the syllables. "I know a Monroe family down in Coeur d'Alene. Not sure about an Abigail." The bell dinged again. A young deputy came in, the kind who was still learning how to wear a uniform without feeling it itch. He stomped snow off his boots, lifted 2 fingers at June. She poured him a cup and slid a plate across before he asked. "Deputy Rios," she said to Evan, as if she were making introductions in a living room. "Rios, this is—" "Evan," he said. "Truckman found an open car up by the state line. He did right and called it in. You folks gonna check it before the plows make it a rumor?" Rios looked at Evan with a polite steadiness. "We got notice," he said. "Patrol is stretched thin with the pass acting mean, but someone'll get eyes on it. You get a plate?" Evan recited the letters and numbers from memory, the way a driver collects details like kindling. Rios wrote them down with the deliberate strokes of a man who does not want to make a second trip. "You see any tracks?" Rios asked. "People? Animals?" Evan shook his head. "Just the wind." Rios nodded once and tucked the notebook back into his breast pocket. "Storms erase things," he said, a fact and a defense in one sentence. June slid a small plate to the dog with 2 thin slices of ham. "You're a gentleman, right?" she told him. "We don't wolf it." The dog, to his credit, did not. He took each slice with a grave care that made June's mouth soften. "You're headed where?" Rios asked. North then east, Evans said. County road up into the hills. A place called Harlow Ridge. Rios gave a short half laugh. You're delivering to Jack Pine Market? That's the name on my route sheet. Old store, older road, Rios said. Watch the grade past the second switchback. Snow drifts there like it rented the place. June topped off Evan's cup. If you see Nora at Jack Pine, tell her June says the rhubarb jam's set right this year. I'll do that, Evans said, tucking the name away as if names were coordinates. He called Naomi from the corner by the payphone that still clung to life near the restrooms, because certain kinds of news feel better with a cord attached to the wall. The line clicked, and then she was there, her voice the sound of home when the house is quiet. You and your storms, she said softly when he told her about the car, the thin light, the dog with amber eyes. Be careful. I am, he said. We'll be off the interstate soon. Might be even slower, but the sky's opening. We? Naomi repeated, and he could hear the smile come into the word. I'm not alone, he said. Temporary passenger. No tag yet. I'll see if anyone in the hills knows him. Don't feed him too much ham, or you'll end up with a seatmate for life. I've done worse, I guess. He paused. Tell Mason I'm aiming for his game. Tell him I'll sit high and embarrass him if I can. I'll pass the threat along, Naomi said. Call me from the market if you can. And Ev, thank you for stopping. Not everyone does. The line hummed after she hung up, then fell quiet. He stood a heartbeat longer than needed, listening to that hush the way you listen to the inside of a seashell. He had the odd feeling of being overheard by the day itself. Back on the road, the dog watched the trees the way some people watch movies, eyes tracking something invisible to the passenger seat. The town fell behind quickly. A handful of roofs. A water tower painted a blue too hopeful for winter. A schoolyard half hidden under drifts. The interstate became a straight command, then a suggestion, then a left turn at a sign most drivers would call decorative. County Road 15 looked like a narrow thought. Evan took it anyway, because the route sheet said do, and because the cargo in his trailer was the kind that turns a cold night into an easier one. The hills leaned in. Ponderosa pines shouldered the wind without complaint. Snowplow berms rose on both sides like the walls of a shallow canyon. The second switchback arrived just where Rios had said it would, piled with the kind of drift that can claim a front bumper like tax. Evan dropped into the gear you use when you're more patient than proud, and let the big truck crawl. The dog braced, paws on the dash, eyes bright. Halfway through the curve, something glinted to the right, above the berm. Quick and wrong. He eased to a stop, set his brake, and rolled the window down. The air that entered was the kind that takes your breath as down payment. On the bank, just visible, a strip of red nylon fluttered from a low branch, torn, wind-flailed. It was the same faded color as the dog's collar. It might have been trash. It might have been a cry. He stepped out, boots sinking to the ankle. The dog leapt after him and landed quiet. Up close, the nylon strip had letters on it, a name stenciled and rubbed nearly blank. He worked at the knot with stiff fingers until it came free, then pressed the fabric flat against his palm. The letters resolved like a slow photograph. A. Monroe. Not proof, not a verdict, but a note that rhymed too well. Evan stood still and listened. The woods did what winter woods do, held back their secrets without being cruel. He looked down the slope. Snow laid itself smooth over a shallow ravine, drifted into soft mounds, a landscape without the punctuation of footprints or tracks. If someone had come through last night, the storm had rewritten the sentence. The dog whined once, a sound that carried more question than fear. Evan slipped the strip of nylon into his jacket pocket. He took one more slow look, as if the earth might clear its throat and offer a hint, then climbed back into the cab. He felt, unexpectedly, a small heat of anger. At the storm, at the empty, at himself for wanting a neat story where the world had clearly chosen a messy one. He drove the remaining miles with the kind of care usually reserved for walking past a sleeping child. The road narrowed again and again. He let the truck find its line, let the engine hold the slope like a steady shoulder. Near mid-afternoon, the trees opened. A cluster of buildings announced itself between two firs. Roofs banked deep, windows bright with the kind of yellow that promises heat even if it lies. Jack Pine Market was painted in hand-cut letters on a plank that had known many winners. Beside it, a sign tacked to a post read, "Community Bulletin" in marker lines, gone faint. He set the brake where the plow had carved a rectangle mercifully large enough to attempt to swing back out later. The dog hopped down first, as if his legs had been made for this exact place. The bell over the market door rang thin and cheerful. Inside, the air smelled like coffee that had been on a hot plate a little too long, like oranges in wooden crates, like wool drying by a stove. A woman with gray hair braided down her back looked up from the register. She wore a flannel shirt the color of river stones and had a posture that made you think of stubborn saplings. "You made it," she said, eyes finding the logo on Evan's jacket, then his face, then the snow bristling on his boots. "June said you'd come. I'm Nora." "Evan," he said. He felt the name settle differently in this room. "I've got your flour and your peaches and the rest of winter's errands." She smiled. "That'll be our survival kit." They unloaded together, because up here, everyone is employed by the weather. In the back, on a shelf by the door, a bulletin board held the usual clippings: bake sale, lost mittens, someone's note offering snowblower sharpening. One page pinned by a thumbtack was newer. The ink was fresh black, the photo slightly overexposed. "Missing," it read at the top. The face was a woman in her middle 30s, with a smile you could believe in. The name under it was Abigail Monroe. Evan felt the room tip a fraction. The dog stood at his knee, quiet but forward, the way animals do when they recognize a word they cannot say. Nora followed his gaze, then flicked her eyes back to him. "You know her?" she asked, not unkind. "I don't," he said, and the truth of that balanced on a thin edge. "I found an empty car near the pass. Her name was on the registration." Nora's mouth made a small line. "That'll be the Monroe from Silver Rapids. Folks been looking since yesterday's last light. You saw the car today?" "This morning," he said. Doors open. Storm had done its part. Nora glanced at the bulletin board again, then lowered her voice, as if winter might be eavesdropping. "There's a thing about this ridge," she said. "Sometimes it sends people back down who never meant to leave. Sometimes it keeps them a while. You learn to talk to it like a neighbor you don't always agree with." He waited. She did not elaborate. "People up here speak in weather reports, even when they are telling you a story." "You can leave a note," she said, nodding at a battered notebook on the counter. "We keep track of eyes and ears. It helps, even when it doesn't." He wrote what he knew in slow letters: the mile marker, the rest area, the color of the car, the strip of fabric with the name, the hour the sky turned strange. He left out the part where he felt watched by the day itself. Some kinds of truth require a second cup of coffee and a seat near the stove. When he finished, the dog nosed his pocket and made a soft huff. Evan pulled out the strip of nylon. Nora took it, turned it over, and set it gently beside the notebook like a small relic. "We'll call her brother," she said. "They'll want to see it, even if it says nothing. Out here, sometimes a small thing keeps the bigger thing from winning." She rang up his coffee and slid a second mug across the counter for free. "For your passenger," she said. "There's water on the stove. Dogs get cold, same as stubborn men." The dog drank like a gentleman. Outside, the light thinned toward the color day gets when it just wants to go be night, in peace. Evan looked at the trucks idling under their pale flags of exhaust, at the tire-rutted snow, at the dark line of pines that began again and again. "Road'll be worse after sundown," Nora said, as if naming weather could make it alter its plans. "You can bunk your rig out back if you need to. We've got a live outlet to keep her warm." "I should push on," Evan said. Then, honest with himself, he added, "But I might not." Nora nodded like that was the sort of wisdom she understood. "Suit yourself. If you hear the wind shift, that's her changing the subject. She does that." Evan stepped back into the afternoon with the kind of caution you use leaving a church, mindful not to slam a door on something you cannot name. The dog went first, a small dark shadow against all that white. Tail carried low, but sure. On the bulletin board behind him, the photo of Abigail Monroe watched the room with a patience that made his chest feel too tight. He closed his hand around the nylon strip in his pocket and felt the rough weave against his palm. The letters pressed into his skin like a faint stamp, as if the day had signed for a delivery he had not yet made. Night laid itself over Harlow Ridge with a kind of finality only mountains understand. The wind slowed to a murmur, and every sound seemed to land heavier in the dark. The ticking of cooling metal, the occasional crack of ice loosening from branches, the steady thrum of diesel from trucks idling for warmth. Evan stayed parked behind the Jack Pine Market, his trailer half buried by a slow, unhurried snowfall. Inside the cab, he'd hung his jacket near the heater vent and stretched across the sleeper berth with the dog curled by his boots. Outside, the world looked powdered and still, like a photograph from a century ago. He should have slept easily. He was bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that normally smoothed out every thought. But something kept him just shy of rest. A feeling like the night was holding its breath. At a little past 10 written out, because time matters differently in quiet places, he sat up. The dog's ears twitched before his did, a soft growl rumbling low in its chest. "What is it, buddy?" Evan whispered. The dog didn't answer, but its eyes fixed on the windshield. Evan followed the gaze. Beyond the frosted glass, the snow was lit by the faint security lamp from the store's side wall. And in that light, barely visible, someone was moving. Slow, careful, as if not to wake the world. Evan leaned forward, wiping a small circle clear with his sleeve. The figure walked from the tree line toward the store. The shape was small, wearing what looked like a coat too thin for this cold. No flashlight. No reason to be out there. "Maybe Nora," he muttered, though he didn't believe it. The figure stopped near the front steps, turned toward the truck for a long heartbeat, then continued along the porch, vanishing behind the building. Evan grabbed his coat. "Stay," he told the dog. The dog didn't move, but watched, tense, as he opened the door. The cold outside was an animal. It bit, then stayed. His breath rose in white bursts. Boots sinking into snow, he made his way around the corner of the market. No one. He checked the path leading toward the trees. Fresh prints, small, boot-shaped, not yet filled by new snow. They led into the woods, where the dark thickened. He hesitated. His better sense said, "Leave it," but his conscience had already taken a step forward. He followed. The path wound between pines and birch, the snow reflecting a dim kind of light, the sort that doesn't come from any obvious source. After maybe 20 paces, or maybe a lifetime, the prints stopped, just ended. No turn, no stumble, no body. Evan turned in a slow circle. Nothing but trees whispering. And then he heard it, a faint, almost human voice. A woman's voice. Close, but not close enough to belong anywhere. It said one word, or maybe two. Wait. He froze, pulse hammering behind his ribs. Who's there? His own voice came out rough, the way it does when a man realizes he's talking to emptiness. No answer. He stood there waiting, until the silence grew so heavy it started to sound like a hum. Then he backed away, step by careful step, until the porch light reappeared through the trees like a beacon. Inside the cab again, he shut the door, hands shaking more than the cold could justify. The dog climbed into his lap, a move it hadn't tried before, and pressed its head against his chest. All right, Evan said softly, scratching behind its ears. We'll both pretend that didn't happen. He meant it too, for a while. But just before dawn, as the gray light began seeping back through the snow clouds, the radio crackled to life, the CB he hadn't touched since yesterday. A man's voice, thin and broken by static, filled the cab. Anyone eastbound on 15, you copy? Evan picked up the mic. Copy, go ahead. Long pause. Then, you see her? The voice was familiar. It sounded like Deputy Rios, though distorted like it was coming from far away or through water. See who? Evan asked. Another pause. The static stretched. The one who walks the ridge. Then silence. He tried calling back. Nothing but white noise. The dog whined, head tilting at the sound. Evan stared out at the trees, the same stretch of forest where the prints had ended, where the air had whispered his name. The snow there looked untouched now, clean as innocence. He exhaled, slow. We're delivering and getting off this mountain, you hear me? The dog blinked once, as if agreeing. By noon the storm broke completely. Sunlight, weak but honest, slanted through the clouds. Nora came out from the market with 2 thermoses and a wave. Good timing, she said. Road crews finally cleared the lower ridge. You can head east after the next town if you want daylight with you. Appreciate that, Evan said. You get any word from her family? Not yet, Nora said quietly. Sometimes news takes the long road home. He climbed into the cab, started the engine, and pulled slowly onto the narrow road. In the mirror, Nora waved once, the market shrinking behind him until it became just a shape in the snow. A few miles down, he glanced at the passenger seat. The dog was watching the window, ears forward. Its fur caught the sunlight, like a halo. What are you looking at? Evan asked. The dog's reflection showed in the glass. But beyond it, faintly, he saw something else. A figure standing at the tree line again. Still, almost translucent in the glare. A woman. Coat too thin for the cold. And when he blinked, she was gone. Evan's grip on the wheel tightened. He didn't look back again until the trees gave way to open road. By the time the sun dropped behind the western ridge, the snow had settled into a clean, almost peaceful stillness. The highway stretched empty ahead of him. 2 pale lanes cutting through a world that looked scrubbed of noise, of memory, of witness. The dog, whom Evan had started calling Red for his collar and the faint tint in his fur, slept curled tight on the seat. Every now and then his paws twitched, chasing something only dreams could see. Evan kept his eyes on the asphalt. Each mile marker flicked past like a pulse. He hadn't seen another truck in nearly an hour. Radio silent, CB dead, except for the occasional whisper of static that sounded just close enough to speech to make him uneasy. He told himself it was fatigue. A man can drive too long and start seeing ghosts in his headlights. But then the headlights blinked. It wasn't the truck. The lights ahead of him, a pair of white beams in the distance, flickered once, twice, then vanished entirely. He slowed. A half-mile later, he saw the source. A pickup pulled halfway onto the shoulder, hazard lights dim and sputtering. He downshifted, eased over, and let the rig side to a stop a safe distance behind. "Stay," he told Red, though the dog was already sitting up, alert. Evan stepped down into the brittle cold, snow crunching under his boots. The wind had gone quiet, but the silence had weight. The pickup's driver's door was open, again. He approached, flashlight beam cutting a thin path through the dark. Inside, the cab was empty. A coffee thermos on the floor, a flannel jacket on the seat, still creased from a body that had been there not long ago. "Hello?" he called, his voice muffled by the snow. "You need help?" No answer. He shone the light across the surrounding ditch and tree line. Nothing. Just the smooth, undisturbed blanket of snow. For a moment, he stood perfectly still. The sound of his own breathing felt too loud. Then he saw it. By the front tire, small, pressed deep into the snow, was a footprint. Then another, leading away from the truck. He followed them without meaning to. They crossed the shoulder, climbed a low rise, and stopped at the edge of a narrow clearing. There, in the center of that clearing, lay something half buried by fresh snow, a small metal locket, glinting faintly under the flashlight. He knelt, brushed the snow away. The clasp was broken. Inside, a photo. A woman, dark hair, smiling, standing in front of a blue lake. Abigail Monroe. His stomach dropped like a stone in cold water. He turned the locket over in his palm. On the back, scratched faintly into the metal, were two words: "Find me." The wind rose just then, sudden and sharp, as if the mountain had drawn a breath. The flashlight dimmed, the beam wobbling, and somewhere, not near, not far, but close enough to be heard, came a sound like a woman calling. "Evan." He froze. The voice was soft, stretched thin by distance, but it said his name clear as truth. "Evan." He spun, light sweeping across the clearing. Nothing, only the falling snow, moving like ash. His pulse hammered in his throat. He whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Just the faint rustle of pine needles. He backed toward the truck, slow, steady, never turning his back fully on the trees. When he climbed into the cab, Red whined and pushed against his arm, trembling. "Yeah," Evan murmured. "I heard it too." He turned the key. The engine caught, then faltered, as if thinking twice about starting. He pressed the accelerator gently, coaxing it to life. The truck shuddered, coughed once, then rumbled back to its usual steady growl. As he pulled back onto the road, he glanced in the mirror. For a heartbeat, only that long, he saw her standing behind the truck, at the edge of the snow glow. Abigail Monroe. The same face from the photo, pale in the light, her eyes fixed on him. And then she was gone. The rest of the drive passed in fragments. The rhythmic slap of wipers, the hum of tires, Red's low breathing. When the road finally widened into a straight stretch near Silver Rapids, he saw the lights of a small gas station, Carter's Stop and Shop. The kind of place that survived on hunters and truckers who needed a bathroom and a sandwich. He pulled in, killed the engine, and sat there a long minute before moving. Inside, the station was warm, the smell of fryer oil and cheap coffee wrapping around him like something almost human. The man behind the counter had the look of someone who'd been awake for 3 days straight. Thinning hair, gray sweatshirt, the quiet stillness of people who've seen every kind of weather. "Evening," the clerk said. "You look like you drove through the belly of it." "Feels that way," Evan said. He poured coffee into a paper cup, hands still shaking a little. "You hear anything on the radio about a missing person? Woman, maybe from up Harlow Ridge?" The man looked up slow. "You mean Abigail?" Evan's chest tightened. "You know her?" "Everyone around here does," the clerk said. "She worked at the library in town. Good woman, sweet, quiet, vanished last winter. Search teams looked for weeks, but..." He stopped, frowned. "Wait, you didn't mean last year?" Evan blinked. "Last year?" "Yeah," the clerk said. "She disappeared in February, a year ago next month." Evan's mouth went dry. "That can't be right. Her car's up near the pass. I saw it 2 days ago." The clerk's eyes narrowed. "Her car was found last spring. They towed it down. You sure what you saw wasn't old?" Evan didn't answer. His mind ran through images. The open door, the glowing phone, the untouched snow. The locket in his pocket, heavy as a stone. He set the cup down, coffee sloshing. "Thanks," he said, voice thin. Back in the truck, he sat a long while without starting the engine. Red's eyes were on him, steady and knowing. "Last year," Evan whispered. "So what the hell did I see?" He opened the locket again, staring at the picture. The glass inside was fogged from the cold, but her eyes seemed clearer now, like she was looking right at him, waiting. And under the hum of the truck, faint but certain, came a sound he hadn't noticed before, like whispering inside the vents, just at the edge of hearing. It was the same voice as before, soft, sad. "Find me." The dog lifted his head, ears sharp. Evan stared straight ahead into the dark, the road stretching endless before him, feeling the cold press closer and somewhere beyond the windshield. In the slow-moving snow, a figure began to walk beside the truck. By morning, the snow had turned crusted and sharp, the kind that crackled underfoot like brittle paper. Evan had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, standing beside the road, lips parted as if about to speak, then swallowed again by the white. He drove east with the sun in his mirrors. The world felt cleaner, but the inside of the cab didn't. The dog, Red, the name had stuck, sat upright, eyes locked on the window as if waiting for something to appear again. The locket lay open on the dashboard, swinging slightly with each turn, catching shards of sunlight. The voice hadn't come back since the whisper in the vents, but the silence left behind wasn't normal. It felt held. He stopped in the town of Silver Rapids just before noon. It was the kind of town that seemed built out of one idea: stay alive through winter, try again in spring. 2 gas stations, a diner, a post office the size of a classroom, and a library with fading paint and a porch that needed fixing. That was where he saw the name again. On the bulletin board beside the library door, just above the local events calendar, was a laminated missing person flyer. Same photo. Same smile. Abigail Monroe. Missing since February the 12th last year. He traced the date with his finger, heart thudding slow and heavy. He went inside. The warmth of the library hit like stepping into another decade. The place smelled of paper and radiator heat. A woman at the desk looked up. She was small, with hair the color of cigarette smoke and an expression that suggested she'd already forgiven the world for most of its sins. Her name tag read M. Monroe. Evan cleared his throat. "Excuse me, ma'am. You wouldn't happen to be related to Abigail Monroe, would you?" Her eyes changed instantly, soft to wary, then to something tired. "I'm her mother," she said. "Why?" He took off his cap, held it in both hands. "I drive trucks through the ridge. He hesitated. "I found her car 2 days ago, still up there." Mrs. Monroe stared at him. "That's impossible. They brought it back. I saw it myself. It's sitting behind the sheriff's impound." "I know how it sounds," he said. "But I saw it. Keys still in the ignition, door open, her phone on the seat, snow fresh around it." She leaned forward, knuckles pale on the counter. "Her phone." He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." Her lips parted, a faint tremor there. "They never found her phone. The search teams—" She stopped herself. "You're sure?" He reached into his coat, pulled out the locket, and set it gently on the counter. "Found this too." Her breath caught. She reached out but didn't touch it. Her voice was barely sound. "That was her mother's. She wore it every day." "I think she wants to be found," Evan said quietly. "Or she doesn't want to be forgotten." Mrs. Monroe blinked hard. "Where exactly did you see the car?" He gave her the marker number. She scribbled it on a scrap of paper, her hand shaking. "I'm going to the sheriff. You should too. Tell him what you told me." "I already did," Evan said. "They said they'd send someone up." She gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "They said that last year." He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded, tipped his cap, and turned to leave. As he reached the door, she called after him. "Mr. Cole. Evan Cole." "Mr. Cole, if you go back up there, be careful. That mountain doesn't give back what it doesn't want to." Outside, the sunlight had turned thin again. He stood for a long time beside his truck, the words turning circles in his head. That mountain doesn't give back what it doesn't want to. He'd planned to head east to make up for lost time. Instead, he found himself turning west, back toward Harlow Ridge. Red gave a soft bark, as if to say, "Of course you are." The climb was slower this time. The road looked familiar, but not the same, like someone had rearranged it while he was gone. Even the mile markers felt slightly off. Halfway up, he saw the turnoff again, the rest area where he'd found the car. He pulled in. Only the car wasn't there. Not even tracks. Just smooth snow. The lot empty except for a single line of tire marks, his own from before. He sat behind the wheel, engine idling low, staring at the spot. The wind moved across the snow in long, deliberate sweeps. Red began to growl. Evan turned. In the side mirror, at the far edge of the lot, a figure was walking along the tree line. It was her. Abigail Monroe, the same thin coat, the same pale face. Her hair lifted slightly in the wind, but the snow didn't cling to her the way it should have. He climbed out slowly, boots crunching. "Abigail?" She turned her head toward him. The distance between them felt longer than the space it occupied. "Abigail," he said again. "If you're real, just say something." Her lips moved. No sound came out, but he read it anyway. "Find me." The wind rose, flinging snow between them like a curtain. When it cleared, she was gone. He stood alone in the middle of the lot, heart pounding, breath sharp in the cold. Back in the cab, he pressed his palms against the steering wheel until the tremor in his hands slowed. Red rested his head in Evan's lap, eyes wide and unblinking. "You saw her," Evan whispered. You saw her too. The dog's tail thumped once against the seat. He started the truck, not sure where he meant to go anymore. On the passenger side, the locket swung again, hitting the dash with a soft metallic sound, steady, rhythmic, almost like knocking. Find me. Find me. The drive down from Harlow Ridge was slower this time. Not because of the road, but because of what waited in his chest. Every sound felt louder in the cab. The engine's low drone, the hiss of snow under the tires, Red's steady breathing. The air smelled faintly of coffee gone cold and fear trying to stay rational. He had planned to radio the sheriff's office again, to give them the marker and the locket and all the strangeness he couldn't name. But when his hand touched the mic, the static roared like a storm had been waiting for that moment. Then it went dead again, flat as an empty room. The road curved along a cliff edge, trees leaning over the guardrail like old witnesses. Below, the valley held a fog that looked solid enough to stand on. The sky above it was the color of steel waiting to be hammered. Evan kept the truck crawling forward, a few miles per hour slower than habit, mind turning over questions he didn't want. Why him? Why the car twice? Why her face? What did she want found? Her body, her story, or something worse? He'd seen wrecks before. He'd hauled freight past scenes still steaming with grief. You learn to look but not linger. But this was different. This was personal in a way it shouldn't be. When he reached the turnout overlooking the valley, he stopped. He needed air that wasn't cab-filtered and diesel-scented. He stepped down, boots cracking the icy crust. The silence out there was immense, a silence with shape and presence. The kind that made your own heartbeat feel like an interruption. He walked a few yards toward the overlook. Snow stretched smooth as marble. The cold went through his jacket like it had been waiting all morning to shake his bones awake. Red followed, paws leaving clean prints behind. When the wind shifted, Evan thought he heard a faint hum, like power lines in summer. Except there were no lines here, just miles of empty air. He turned in a slow circle. Nothing but trees, sky, snow. And then, behind him, a whisper. Evan. He spun. The air itself seemed to shimmer for a heartbeat. And there she was again. Not distant this time, but close, a few paces away. Abigail Monroe. Her face was pale, but not ghostly. More like someone who hadn't been in sunlight for too long. Her eyes were the color of thawing ice, clear and full of something that wasn't anger or fear, but need. You can see me, she said softly. Her voice didn't echo. It didn't have to. Evan's throat went dry. Yeah, I can. Good, she said. Then maybe you can help me go home. He stepped closer, breath steaming between them. You've been missing a year. Her head tilted slightly, as if measuring the weight of that word. A year, she repeated, almost to herself. Time doesn't stay right here. It folds. He stared. Abigail, where are you? I mean, really? A flicker of pain crossed her face. Somewhere between where I was and where I should have been. The dog whined, low and uncertain. She looked at it, smiled faintly. You found him, she said. You mean Red? He's been with me. I didn't think he'd leave. Red pressed closer to Evan's leg, tail stiff. Abigail's voice softened. He followed me when I got lost in the storm. Tried to keep me awake. I wanted to stop. He didn't. The story clicked together in pieces that didn't make sense yet. Evan swallowed. What happened to you? I was driving down the ridge, she said. A truck passed me too close. Headlights in the mirror, wind pushing me sideways. I hit ice near the switchback. She paused, eyes shifting toward the valley below. It was fast after that. quieter than I thought it would be. You crashed. She nodded once. The storm covered it by morning. He turned toward the trees, the slope. Then your car, the one I found. Sometimes it comes back, she said, when someone's listening. The words hit him harder than the wind. Why me? He asked. Her gaze met his. Because you stopped. He wanted to say that wasn't enough, that anyone would have. But the truth was, not everyone does. Abigail stepped closer, the air between them colder now, as if her presence carried the memory of the place she'd been trapped. I need you to find what's left. It's down there. She pointed toward the slope beneath the overlook, where the snow rolled smooth and untouched. You'll know when you're close. The road knows. He nodded slowly. Okay. Her expression softened, relief breaking through. Thank you. Then, as sudden as the blink of a headlight, she was gone. No fading, no sound, just absence. Evan stood there, staring at the space she'd filled. The air still shimmered faintly like heat off pavement. When he finally turned back toward the truck, Red was already waiting, paws planted, watching him with an understanding that went deeper than words. Yeah, Evan said, voice low. We're going down there. He climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and steered carefully off the main road, following a narrow maintenance track that dropped toward the valley. The truck's weight made the snow squeal under its tires. Every turn felt like a held breath. The sun fell behind the ridge, light thinning to blue. He kept driving until the track disappeared entirely, the world flattening into a basin of white. And then, between two firs, he saw it. A faint glint under the ice, something metallic and half-buried. He braked, climbed out, and trudged forward. Red bounded ahead, nose to the ground, tail low and alert. 10 yards in, the shape became clear. The crushed outline of a car roof, windows frosted over from the inside. A vehicle swallowed by snow and time, the same make, same color, Abigail's car. Evan's breath clouded in the air. He reached out, brushed the snow from the windshield. Through the glass, faint but visible, lay a shape in the driver's seat. Small, still, and wrapped in the shimmer of frozen air. His stomach turned. Oh, God. He stepped back, chest tight. Red pressed against his leg, whining. Evan whispered, "We found you." From somewhere behind him, the wind rose again, carrying her voice, softer now, lighter, as if carried away on relief. Thank you. The sound faded into the trees. Evan stood there a long time, hat in hand, the snow settling gently around him, as if the mountain itself had exhaled. He called it in just after sunset. His voice shook only once, on the word found. The dispatcher went quiet a long moment before answering. Then came the sound of keys clattering, paper sliding. "Stay where you are," the voice said finally. "We're sending a team." Evan didn't say he couldn't leave if he wanted to. The slope was too slick, the road too narrow, and the rig's tires half buried. He clicked off the mic and sat with his hands on the wheel, feeling the vibration of the idling engine run up his arms. Red lay curled by the door, eyes half closed, as if even he understood the weight of waiting. Outside, night came fast. The ridge swallowed what little light the sky had left. It was the kind of dark that didn't just cover things, it erased them. He stared out the windshield toward the faint shadow of trees and the white mound where the car lay. Every few minutes he thought about stepping back down, brushing more snow away, doing something. But each time he tried, something in him refused. A kind of quiet command that said, "You've done what she asked. Let the rest be hers." When the first headlights appeared through the trees, he didn't move. 2 trucks, county rescue, orange strobes flashing like distant lightning. Men climbed out, voices low, movements practiced. Deputy Rios was with them. He looked older than he had at the diner, eyes dark from too many nights like this. "You found her," he said. Evan nodded. "She found me first." Rios frowned, but didn't ask. Maybe he didn't want to. The men worked fast, careful but silent. They cut through the ice around the car doors, brushed away the layers of snow that had turned to glass. Every sound carried too clearly. The scrape of metal, the soft thud of shovels, the hiss of radios. When they finally lifted the door open, the night seemed to lean closer. Rios stood with his hat in his hand. "We'll bring her down careful," he said. Evan stayed where he was. He didn't need to see what he already knew. After a while, Rios walked over, his boots crunching on the ice. "You can head back to town," he said gently. "We'll take it from here." "I'll wait," Evan said. Rios studied him a moment, then nodded. "All right." The work went on under floodlights that turned the snow the color of bone. The men moved with quiet reverence. One of them crossed himself before stepping away from the car. When they finally loaded her into the truck, the night seemed to sigh. The air felt different, lighter somehow. Rios came back once more. "Her folks will want to thank you," he said. Evan looked toward the trees, where the wind had started up again. "Just tell them she wasn't alone." Rios didn't ask what that meant. He just touched the brim of his hat and walked off. When the trucks drove away, their tail lights winding down the mountain like slow-moving embers, Evan sat there until the sound faded. The snow began again, soft and steady. He closed his eyes. And for a moment, he thought he heard her voice one last time, clear, close, without fear. "You can go home now, Evan." He opened his eyes. Red was watching him, tail thumping once. "Yeah," Evan said quietly. "Home." He made it back to Billings 2 days later. Naomi met him on the porch, hair pulled up, worries still clinging to her like smoke. Mason was beside her, taller than before somehow, the way kids always seem after you've been gone too long. Evan stepped down from the truck and stood there, not ready to speak. Naomi crossed the space first. "You okay?" He nodded. "I think so." "You look like you've seen a ghost," Mason said, half a joke, half truth. Evan managed a small smile. "Something like that." Inside, the warmth and the smell of dinner wrapped around him. For a long time, he didn't talk. He just sat at the table, listening to them talk about small things. School, bills, weather, the world going on. Later, when the house was quiet, he walked out to the garage. The locket lay on the dashboard where he'd left it. He picked it up, turned it once in his fingers. The photo inside had changed. Not much, just enough. The faint shadow that had always lingered behind Abigail's shoulder was gone. The lake behind her looked clearer, brighter, like sunlight had finally reached it. He smiled, a slow, private thing, and set it back on the dash. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft, clean, harmless this time. Red barked once from the doorway, tail wagging. Evan looked out at the road stretching away into the dark. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel endless. It felt like it led somewhere that wasn't waiting to take something from him. And 2 days later, a letter arrived at the depot. It was addressed in careful handwriting. Marjorie Monroe. Inside was a small thank you card. No return address, no phone number. just a single line written in ink that had bled slightly into the paper. You helped her come home. That's enough. Evan folded it once, slid it into his logbook, and closed it. The next morning, he was back on the highway, the Peterbilt humming steady beneath him. The radio played low, static threading through a country song about second chances and the long way back. Snow drifted down from a sky as pale as old silver. At mile marker 15, the same curve where it had all begun, he saw a shape standing at the edge of the woods. A woman. Coat buttoned, hair loose. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. He lifted 2 fingers off the wheel in a quiet salute. When he blinked, she was gone. But the road ahead seemed brighter, as if the mountain itself had finally decided to keep only what belonged to it and let go of everything else. Spring came late that year. The ice broke in slow sighs along the Yellowstone, and the fields near Billings stayed patchy with gray snow until almost April. Evan took shorter runs, local hauls between small towns, the kind of work that let him sleep in his own bed and wake to Naomi humming in the kitchen. Sometimes, when he'd pull out of the depot before dawn, he'd glance in the mirror expecting to see the glow of another rig in the distance. He'd half expect a shape at the roadside, but the road stayed honest. It gave him miles, nothing more. Red rode with him now, a permanent passenger with his own seat and a blanket Naomi sewed from an old flannel. The dispatcher joked that the dog had better attendance than most drivers. Mason liked to sit in the truck on weekends, feet on the dash, listening to the hum of the idling engine while his dad checked the tires. Life had found its ordinary rhythm again, but quiet doesn't always mean still. Always mean. Late one evening, after Mason's game and a dinner full of laughter that felt like borrowed light, Evan sat on the porch with a cup of coffee gone lukewarm. Naomi joined him, tucking her knees under a blanket. "You don't talk about it," she said finally. He looked at her. "About what?" "The mountain." He smiled faintly. "Would you believe I still don't understand it?" "Maybe you're not supposed to." The wind moved through the cottonwoods, carrying the smell of wet earth. The sound was soft, like someone flipping slow pages. "She was real," he said, "and not. Both. I don't think she wanted to scare me. She just needed someone to listen." Naomi nodded, watching the river of headlights on the distant interstate. "You always were good at listening to things most people ignore." He thought about that. About the years of lonely miles, of voices over static, of highways that felt like they might start speaking if you stayed out there too long. Maybe he had been tuned to the right frequency at the right time. Maybe guilt and compassion sound the same to the dead. He reached over, found her hand under the blanket. "It feels like the mountain let go," he said, like it wanted to be forgiven for keeping her. "Maybe it was waiting for you," Naomi said. He looked out at the night, thinking about that possibility, how some things wait not for answers, but for witnesses. Narger Haukras a month later, he was delivering supplies up near Coeur d'Alene when a deputy flagged him down at a rest stop. "Cole?" the man asked. "You the driver who found that woman up Harlow Ridge?" Evan tensed. "Yes, sir." The deputy handed him a plain envelope. "Her mother left this at the station for you." He nodded his thanks and waited until he was back in the cab before opening it. Inside was a folded photograph. Abigail Monroe standing in front of the library, smiling in sunlight. On the back, written in the same neat hand as the earlier letter, "For the man who stopped." Evan sat a long time with the photo in his hands. The hum of idling engines around him sounded like a choir that didn't need words. He tucked the photo into the visor beside the Polaroid of Naomi and Mason. When he pulled back onto the highway, the sky had that wide blue you only get after winter has finally surrendered. Red stood with his paws on the console, nose to the glass, tail sweeping slow. "Yeah," Evan said, scratching behind his ear. "She's home." Thus, by early summer, word about the ridge had turned to rumor again. Drivers swapped the story over diner counters and way station coffee. The ghost that guided a trucker to her own grave. Some swore they'd seen her light near the pass. Others said it was just reflection from the snowplows. Evan never corrected them. He'd just listen, sip his coffee, and let the story belong to the road. Because some truths are heavier when spoken, and this one didn't need his voice to live. He'd learned that grief can echo through miles of asphalt, that kindness sometimes crosses from one world to the next, and that silence, when you really listen, isn't empty at all. That August, Mason's team won their division. Evans shouted himself hoarse from the stands, and Naomi caught him on video, grinning like he'd forgotten how to be tired. On the drive home, Mason asked, "Dad, you think ghosts are real?" Evan kept his eyes on the dark ribbon of highway, headlights painting the trees ahead. "I think," he said after a long moment, "that sometimes people get lost between places, and sometimes, if we're lucky, we can help them find their way." Mason nodded like that made perfect sense. "So you'd help, right?" "I'd stop," Evan said. "Always stop." They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, Red's head resting on the console, Naomi humming quietly with the radio. When they pulled into the driveway, the porch light came on, the same one Naomi always left burning. He sat there a second before cutting the engine, watching the glow spill across the snowless yard, steady and sure. "Home," he said softly. That night, long after the house went quiet, he woke to the faintest whisper of wind against the window. For a moment, he thought he heard her voice again, not pleading this time, just a thank you carried by the air. He smiled in the dark, whispered, "You're welcome," and let sleep take him. Outside, the world was still, the roads empty, the mountains far away, but no longer waiting. Autumn crept in quietly that year, painting the cottonwoods gold and brushing frost along the edges of morning. The world felt steadier now, gentler in ways Evan hadn't realized he'd needed. The nightmares had stopped. The whispers were gone. Only a silence remained. Not the heavy kind that haunted him before, but the peaceful sort, like the hush between songs. His roots stayed local. He'd leave before dawn, the Peterbilt humming low through the empty streets of Billings, and come back by dinner, headlights carving through the dark like faithful promises. Red sat upright in the passenger seat, his collar newly polished, his breath fogging the glass. Sometimes, on clear mornings, Evan would see his reflection in the windshield, just a man and a dog, miles ahead of the sunrise. And it felt like forgiveness. The dispatchers still teased him. "Old Cole," they'd say, "the man who talks to ghosts and still makes his deliveries on time." He'd laugh, shrug, and keep his secret. Because it wasn't about ghosts. It was about being seen, even by what the world had forgotten. One Friday, Naomi packed sandwiches and a thermos of strong coffee, kissed him on the cheek, and said, "You haven't been up toward the ridge since, you know." "I was thinking about it," he admitted. She smiled softly. "Maybe it's time." By mid-afternoon, he was there again. The curve in the road where winter once stopped his heart. The air was clear, the trees still green, but edged with fire. The sky stretched enormous and endless above him. He parked at the turnout, the same one that overlooked the valley, and shut off the engine. The wind smelled of pine and distant snow. Red jumped down, sniffed the air, tail wagging slow. Evan walked to the edge of the overlook. The slope below looked nothing like the place of that night. The snow was gone, replaced by grass and wildflowers that swayed in lazy rhythm. The trees whispered softly, a sound that felt less like warning and more like conversation. He stood there a long time, hat in hand. "I brought you back," he said quietly. "You can rest now." No answer. Just wind. And that was enough. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the locket, the same one he'd found buried in the ice. He opened it one last time. The photo inside was bright now, colors vivid, her smile easy. The lake behind her looked like it was breathing sunlight. He closed it gently, then knelt by a rock near the edge of the overlook and buried the locket there, pressing the earth firm. When he stood, Red was watching him, head tilted. "Come on," Evan said softly. "We've got miles to go." They walked back to the truck. The wind at their backs felt warm for once. By the time he got home, the sky had turned the color of old copper. Mason was on the porch steps with his guitar, fumbling through chords that didn't quite fit together but sounded right anyway. Naomi sat beside him, reading. Evan leaned against the rail, listening. "How was it?" Naomi asked without looking up. "Quiet," he said. "Good kind of quiet." "Did you?" "Yeah," he said. "I let her go." She smiled then, small and knowing. "About time." Mason plucked a wrong note, grimaced. "Mom says I've got no rhythm." Evan laughed. "You just haven't found your road yet." But that night, after the house settled into sleep, he sat alone by the window with a cup of coffee gone cold. The stars over Montana burned like 1,000 tiny headlights, stretching toward nowhere in particular. He thought about the things we leave behind. Photos, memories, miles, ghosts, and how the road holds them all without judgment. He thought about Abigail Monroe and the storm, and the way her voice had softened when she finally said thank you. And he thought about how sometimes saving someone means being willing to listen when no one else will. The wind moved through the trees outside, the faint sound of tires on a distant highway whispering like old friends saying goodbye. Evan smiled, finished his coffee, and whispered to the quiet, "See you down the road." Then he turned out the light. Thank you for listening to this story. If you liked it, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support inspires new stories